On that topic, I would love to invite our Women in Technology finalists to come up to the stage. This week, today, these girls have gone through a grueling process of interviews and, yeah, come on stage. Interviews and sort of roundtable discussions, and one of their topics, one of their case study questions for their interviews was, with $10,000 and an instance of Palantir, what would you do to improve the numbers of women in technology? And the answers across the board were incredible, all of the ideas that came out. So I think that there's so much creativity in this room, on this stage, and I think that there's a lot of potential for good that we can do. So I just want to introduce everybody. We've got Katie Hawthorne and Pratiksha Thakur, Elena Frey, Nikki Dell, Carrie Kai, Anna Simpson, and Omoshola Atunde, right?
Adetunde, yeah, Omoshola Adetunde.
I knew I was going to mess her name up. But let's get a great round of applause for our finalists. Each of them will be rewarded a grant of some amount to go towards their education. So that's news to them that they're all going to win something. So congratulations to these ladies, and I'd love to have a round of applause for them. Angela?
Hello. Hi, my name is Angela Mueller. I joined Palantir in 2010, but prior to that, I've been a software engineer in the Valley since 1999. At almost 36, that makes me a geezer in Palantir terms. But it's also so exciting to see a room full of female engineers, because I can remember when I first started and going to WWDC with 1,000 or more engineers. I was pretty much the only girl there back in 1999. So it's been fantastic to see this shift. Let's see. Most recently, I've been working with Chelsea Geyer out of Resolve, and she's been working to basically eradicate Joseph Kony. Many of you have probably seen the Kony 2012 video. It went viral. And our Palantir philanthropy team actually has gotten the opportunity to do a lot of really interesting work, particularly within the last year. So we have projects like Chelsea's, but we also have projects in human trafficking and disease outbreak, that sort of thing. And we are hiring. So if you are inspired by Chelsea's work tonight, you should come talk to us. And with that, here's Chelsea.
Hello. I tend to walk around a little bit, so if I stray from the podium, someone just signal me to shift back over, please. Like Angela said, my name is Chelsea. I work for Resolve, based out of Washington, D.C., on the LRA Crisis Tracker in conjunction with our friends at Invisible Children. I want to thank Palantir for bringing me out here and giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys. This is really exciting, and you should all, if you aren't already in a career in technology, be considering that, and you should look towards the humanitarian sector because we have a lot of fun, and we work on really cool projects. I also want to thank you guys as women in technology for the work that you do. It makes my life and my job more efficient and effective. And I thank you as a woman for being women and blazing this new frontier. So thank you. I want to start today off with a story, and I warn you because it's kind of a sad story, but I think that there are lessons to be learned from this. I think that we are learning these lessons, and I think that it eventually ends in hope. So on December 13th, 2009, a rebel army began attacking small villages in the Democratic Republic of Congo. What they would do is they would go into the village, and they would find a market, a school, a church, somewhere where they knew a lot of people would be. And they would say, come, come, we're part of the National Army. And as people gathered, they would begin to abduct them and tie them into human chains and take them into the next village, where they would do the same thing to the next, to the next. And this violent spree lasted for almost 5 days. By the end of it, over 300 civilians had been brutally murdered, 250 had been abducted, 80 of those were children. It took 2 weeks for news of this attack to reach a community only 75 kilometers away. And it took 3 months before the international community knew that hundreds had died and hundreds others had been abducted. This guy, Joseph Kony, who would be famous from the Kony 2012 video if you've seen it, is the leader of this rebel army, or the Lord's Resistance Army, the LRA. He is indicted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, and you would know him from Kony 2012. The Lord's Resistance Army, just a quick, brief history, began in northern Uganda, coming out of a civil war. They were one of many rebel groups who tried to bring down an oppressive government. Unfortunately, they quickly turned on civilians and began conscripting children to be child soldiers in their army. In the mid-2000s, they were pushed out by the Ugandan army and are now operational in South Sudan, Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The shaded area is a little outdated, but that's around where they're currently operational. And the massacres I told you about have become known as the Makombo massacres, and it was the second largest attack outside of northern Uganda committed by the LRA. And it sparked a question in the minds of the international community, as it should have. Why, in an age of Twitter and Facebook and social networking sites, many of whom you guys probably work for, did it take us 3 months to find out about an attack on hundreds of people? Why, in an age when I get breakfast updates from my friends and a new picture every time their new baby smiles, and you all know what I'm talking about, did it take us 3 months to find out about this attack? And so the LRA Crisis Tracker was part of our response. This is a picture of our website. Users can come and toggle in between different incident types. They can see attacks by time. They can search for specific communities. And our data is fairly comprehensive back to about September 2009, which is unprecedented for the LRA conflict. So in thinking about the Makombo massacres and in thinking about how the LRA Crisis Tracker can effectively resolve, using data, can effectively resolve the LRA crisis, we focus on 3 specific needs. The first is a faster way for vulnerable communities to communicate. What would have been different if the Makombo massacres, if one village had been able to tell the next what was going on? Things would have been very different. There were reports of one man on a motorcycle who attempted to tell the next village, but he was intercepted by the LRA and murdered on the way. The second and third need kind of run into each other. In order to have an accurate picture of what's going on with the LRA, we need to have an accurate record of what they're actually doing. They don't get to be anonymous. That's not okay in the world that we live in today. They've been able to operate for so long because this region is so remote, and so we're trying to end that. The second is that we're also a policy organization. And so when we go before Congress and when we strategize about future aid and future strategy to actually end the LRA, we want to make sure that we have timely information to do this. So real quick, this is how the Crisis Tracker does this. The first is an early warning network system. This directly addresses the problem of communities being able to communicate with each other. The early warning network system is a series of radios where each radio intercoms into a larger hub twice a day. So whereas it used to take 2 weeks for that information to travel, it now just takes a matter of hours, if that. And whereas it used to take 3 months for us to know about it internationally, we can have it up on the site and publicized in as little as 2 days. The second is the database, and this is the part that I work on. We aggregate from a multitude of sources, plug it into the database where we can review and verify it. We make sure it's the LRA. We make sure it actually happened. Those are really important things. And then we can run analysis and reports on this, and then it's blasted onto the map. So I want to take a step back real quick. Throughout the development of our project, we've asked the question, now what? So we have all this data, now what? How do we use this to affect actual change? And we've learned 2 things, which I think are lessons that a lot of people working in data have learned. The first is that more data doesn't automatically equal more solutions. And the second is that, sorry, lost my train of thought there. The second is that we have to take responsibility for the effective use of our data. We have to own that. And so as we were thinking about this, and as we were wanting to expand our analysis horizons, a software company with a really funny name kind of knocked on our doors. And then Palantir walks in. And this is an example of how we've used Palantir. This is actually not an attack type that you're seeing up here, but our sourcing. Before, we were only able to look at when attacks happened and what type of attacks were happening, but now we can look at all sort of different data points, and we can view our data from different perspectives, and that allows us to have a more comprehensive understanding of what's going on. So we were looking at sourcing to try and find gaps in our data, which is really important when you think about verifying data and making sure we have the right information. So what the Crisis Tracker aims to do is take these really big questions and break them down into smaller, tangible questions that we can answer with data. So like, what does the LRA need? What the LRA needs is going to be a driving factor in what they do. It's going to show us a little bit of their overall strategy. So I've been approaching this question from 2 key questions. The first is what are the LRA taking? What sort of goods? What type of food? What do they need? The second is what people are they abducting? And I want to explore that one using Palantir real quickly. Oh, going back. There we go. I'm right there with you, Lucy. This is an example of how we're exploring the types of person that the LRA are abducting. The red is abductions and the blue is returnees, meaning that they were able to come out of LRA captivity. And the bottom is adults. And what we're seeing is a trend where adults are being abducted and released quickly to use for ported goods, and not as many children are being abducted. That's a shift in strategy for the LRA, and a fairly important shift. The second thing that we're seeing is that males are being abducted and released, whereas females are being abducted and kept, where they're traditionally used for sex slaves and domestic servants. And that's an important shift to know about. If we know that the LRA isn't indoctrinating children soldiers like they used to, we can know two things. We can infer two things. One, that possibly their capacity has been reduced. They can't stay in one place for as long. And two, that they're trying to keep a lower profile because they know that people are after them. And we think it's actually a combination of both. Another big question is, where do the LRA attack? And what we're really asking here is, what influences how they attack? Because if we can understand that, then we can understand a little bit more about how they move. So here's an example using Palantir, where we explored what the influence of security forces or armies has on whether or not the LRA attacks a village. And there should be a video. In this demonstration, we will compare villages with security forces to those without any type of formal protection. We were interested in seeing whether there was a visible effect on violence based on the presence of these forces. For this, we can use the map application's radius tool. This allows us to search for events around particular villages, like those connected to the high-frequency radio network, or villages that consistently receive types of international aid. We can filter for events that occur within a 10-kilometer radius around villages with security forces and villages without security forces. We can now search for events with specific properties occurring inside these areas. In this example, we filtered further for attacks including abduction, looting, or violence, which were verified and which had the LRA as an actor. We can now compare events occurring in the villages to see if we notice any trends. Using the timeline, we can see that the concentration of attacks in areas with security forces decreased in the last half of the year, and this might warrant further investigation. We can qualify what we're seeing by deriving a count of objects per village area and see how many attacks are occurring in the hardest hit villages. We can also use the histogram to compare the kinds of attacks that are occurring, and we can see that abductions are the most common type of attacks around the villages with security forces, while villages without forces have more lootings. So that's just one example of many ways that we're able to view our data in Palantir that we would never be able to view before. And it's quite fascinating, actually, because if we can understand how a security force influences a village, whether that means the LRA attacks more frequently or they don't, that can be key in our future strategy. And this infograph right here is just a quick example of how we can change that analysis into an infograph that'll eventually be on our site. So again, we ask, now what? We go back to those lessons that we were learning, where we take responsibility. We always take responsibility for using our data to actually accomplish goals, something that Lucy talked about. And this is how we've begun to answer that question. The first is through our quarterly reports. These are blasted out to partners globally, where we include the most updated information on the LRA, LRA analysis, LRA statistics, unprecedented information to this conflict. It used to be a very niche issue, and now we can bring all types of data to the table. But then again, we must take personal responsibility. So a project that my organization will soon be working on is building out our command structure. And we're gonna see if we can't attach attacks to specific LRA commanders and then begin analyzing those for trends unique to that commander. And why is this important? Because if these guys are captured alive, they will face the International Criminal Court. And we wanna make sure that there's plenty of evidence and plenty of accountability for them, waiting for them. We're also making sure that our data can be admissible in front of the International Criminal Court, which is quite exciting. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to listen to me. I think many things have changed since the Macomb massacres, and I believe that we're seeing much hope as things continue to change. For me, one of my favorite parts of this project is that the technology ranges from radios on top of bamboo shoots to some of the most advanced data analysis software we've got out there. And that's kind of the point of technology, is that it adapts to its surroundings. And it's quite exciting to be in a room of leaders in that next adaptation for technology. So thank you.